I've got a label as a bad guy now, and I'm not a bad guy. I just want to play basketball. Things started out so good. Then, sometimes I'd say to myself, how can this be happening to me? Those were the words of Bob McAdoo after playing for his fourth team in 3 years. Everybody was asking the same question that he made to himself. What on earth happened to him? Even Los Angeles Times writer Jim Murray wrote this about this peculiar situation in 1981. Quote, "No one could understand it. The touch was still there. The points were still there. He didn't slug baby seals over the head with baseball bats in the off-season. He was a basketball player, one of the game's best ever, and he couldn't keep a job." End of quote. This still remains one of the game's greatest mysteries. But after doing a lot of digging, I was able to find an answer. Before we get to that, we first must understand just how great of a player he was. In the 1973-74 season, his second year in the NBA, he helped lead the Buffalo Braves to their first winning season since forming in 1970. He was once considered too frail to play the center position. By the end of his sophomore season, he averaged 30.6 points on 55% shooting, 15.1 rebounds, and 3.3 blocks per game. He wasn't a physical force around the rim. Instead, he was one of the most elite outside shooters in the game. Nobody had ever seen this from a player his size. Bill Russell went as far as to call him the best shooter of all time. On defense, Walt Frazier gave him the ultimate compliment. He said that near the basket, he's almost a Bill Russell. In the following season, he took his game to new heights. He averaged the insane stat line of 34.5 points on 51% shooting, 14.1 rebounds, and 2.1 blocks per game. He recorded the 8th most total points for a single season ever. He was so dominant that he was awarded the MVP. Keep in mind that he was competing against Kareem, Rick Barry, and Elvin Hayes. He proved that he was already at their level. He continued his strong play the next season, helping the team win its first playoff series. He even recorded over 50 points and 20 rebounds during the playoff game in 1975. In those 3 years, he won an MVP. He finished runner-up in the other 2 seasons, and he won 3 straight scoring titles. He already accomplished so much, and he hadn't even turned 25 years old yet. He was only going to get better. In fact, Buffalo's coach Jack Ramsey mentioned to reporters that by the time Bob McAdoo is through, he'll be the greatest player in history. That was the impression that he left. Then, all of a sudden, they gave up on him. At the beginning of the 1976-77 season, the Braves traded away the MVP to the New York Knicks for John Giannelli and a reported $3 million. John was a player that averaged 7.8 points per game for his career. Why would they agree to such a lopsided trade? The reasoning behind this move was that McAdoo's contract was set to expire by the end of that season, and negotiations had hit a roadblock. They simply didn't want to risk losing him for nothing. The Knicks, on the other hand, were ecstatic to land the young superstar. They were desperately looking for a big man who could replace Willis Reed, who retired in 1974. They needed someone who could score and rebound. He was going to be able to fill that void perfectly. In 1977, he finished 5th in both scoring and rebounds. In 1978, he finished 3rd in scoring and 8th in rebounds. He was able to put up numbers even while playing with some great talent. He played alongside Hall of Famer Spencer Haywood and Earl Monroe. They had the pieces necessary to win, but they faced a disappointing end to their season. In the second round of the 1978 semifinals, they got swept by Dr. J and the Philadelphia 76ers. They lost by an average margin of 18.8 points. That's when things started to get ugly. Bob heard that some of his teammates were complaining about not having a big center. Then, he blamed certain players for their lack of intensity. Then others were complaining about rookie head coach Willis Reed, that he wasn't ready for such an assignment. There were a lot of finger pointing. What was their excuse for such an underwhelming season? They had one of the top producing scorers and rebounders in the league. He was paired with 2 other all-star caliber players. How could they only win 43 games and lose so badly in the playoffs? The spotlight was starting to be put on Bob McAdoo. For more insight, check out what Dave Anderson wrote for the New York Times in 1979. Quote, For all his points, Bob McAdoo never understood that he was sabotaging the team with all his shots. And he had to go when the Knicks front office learned of his recent offhand remark. Mac told somebody, a Knicks official says, that he was not going to play hard until the last year of his contract, which has 2 more seasons to go after this one. End of quote. That made it easy for the Knicks to pull out this next move. In the middle of the 1978-79 season, they traded Bob to the Boston Celtics for Tom Barker and 3 first-round draft picks. The deal took place between the team owners without consulting the general managers or the coaches. That's how desperate they were to move on. After the news broke, this is what Knicks president Mike Burke said about the deal. Quote, "We have come to the conclusion that stars are less important. We have decided to build a winner with a group of players. We will try to have a balanced squad that will play as a team rather than as individuals. We have now put ourselves in a position to rebuild the team." End of quote. This is one of the first insights into what the major problem was surrounding this ultra-talented player, is that he seemed to care more about his stats than playing as a team. That kind of mentality from a star player stops any team from reaching its potential. It was an ugly end to his tenure in the Big Apple, but that was nothing compared to what happened in Boston. This was a team and a city that he did not want to play for. He even told the Cooper Showtime podcast that he didn't want to go to Boston because he was hated in Boston, and he felt the same way about that city. Then there was a controversy surrounding him and Dave Cowens. He was the player coach at the time, and he decided not to start him for multiple games. The idea was to work him slowly into the offensive system, but that's not how he took it. This is what he told the reporters during that offseason. Quote, "I don't want to be in Boston because of Dave Cowens. He sat me down because he didn't like the idea of me being there last season. The team didn't have enough talent to keep me sitting." End of quote. The team's executive, Red Auerbach, didn't hold anything back when asked about the deal. This is what he said, according to the New York Times. Quote, "I was violently opposed to the trade. As great of a scorer as he is not a great defensive player, and you don't build with one player. Dave tried to teach him our system, the Celtic way, but he was not interested in learning. He was only interested in his average and playing minutes." End of quote. This was an arrangement that was doomed to fail. He only played 20 games with the organization, and he was traded to the Detroit Pistons. He expressed his excitement to play alongside the legendary big man, Bob Lanier. Now, he could play his natural position, the power forward. On paper, it made sense. But as the season progressed, they kept losing and losing. After 37 games, they had a 9-28 record, which was the worst in the league. That's when the Pistons decided to end the Bob Lanier era, and they traded him away to the Milwaukee Bucks. That move symbolized that they were giving up on the season. It was time to start rebuilding. Bob McAdoo is known for being ultra competitive, and he wants to win more than anything. He wasn't happy with the way the season was turning out, but he reached his breaking point in a game against his former team, the New York Knicks. He played only 15 minutes in the first half, and he was benched for the rest of the game. It was reported that he had an ugly outburst with his coach, Richie Adubato. In the following game, against another former team, the Celtics, he was sat out completely. This was the message that the coach said to reporters: "If he's an unhappy player, we're not going to play him." They were serious about this, and he came off the bench for the next 5 games. They later inserted him back into the starting lineup, but he only lasted 3 games. He was added to the injury reserve list and missed the rest of the year. He continued battling with injuries in the following season. He only played 6 games with the Pistons, but at one point, he felt ready to come back to the court. But the front office had a harsh message to him. The general manager told him that they didn't want to play him the rest of the year, and they wanted to continue giving the young players time to develop. Since he wasn't following their rules of being present at games, they essentially told him that they were done with him. He was waived by the team. A few days later, the New Jersey Nets decided to pick him up. Bob was anxious to prove that he was still one of the best players in the league, but each time he rushed back, he re-injured himself. Fans were getting so impatient that it was reported that he was booed unmercifully. He only played 10 games for the New Jersey Nets. At the end of the season, he was a free agent. He intended to not play for the Nets. However, they retained the rights to him because he did not give them an offer sheet under the league's new right of first refusal policy. So he sat out the first 25 games of the season as they waited for any potential deals. The question was, will there be any takers? For a while, the phone wasn't ringing. Teams were hesitant to give him a chance. For example, this is what John Steinmiller, the vice president of the Bucks, said about him. Quote, "McAdoo is a risk. So many bad things have happened to him. You have to wonder, how much is his own doing?" End of quote. The player that some people once believed would be the greatest ever couldn't find a home. It seemed to be a heartbreaking end to what was considered a promising career. But then, the Los Angeles Lakers picked up the phone. They were willing to roll the dice. As it turned out, they needed a power forward, with Mitch Kupchak going down with an injury. The Lakers were also looking for something to spark this team. They had their own problems that they were dealing with. Magic Johnson and their head coach, Paul Westhead, had an ugly exchange earlier in the year. He was even talking about leaving the team. That led to the Lakers parting ways with Paul. Pat Riley eventually took over full-time as a coach. It was an up and down season for this team. But once the playoffs rolled around, they couldn't stop winning. They became the first team to ever sweep their way to the finals. The secret to their success was Bob McAdoo. Take, for example, the conference finals series against the San Antonio Spurs. While coming off the bench, he averaged 20 points on 58% shooting, 7.3 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. He was their third leading scorer. There was no other team that had that kind of weapon leading their second unit. He gave this team a whole new dynamic, and no one could stop them. The Lakers eventually won the title, beating the Sixers in 6 games. And just like that, Bob McAdoo was considered a winner. By the time his career was over, he had won 2 titles and reached the finals in 4 consecutive years. Bob McAdoo was surely humbled after going through all those experiences with those teams. Like any other former MVP, they feel like they can continue playing at that level for a very long time. When asked to come off the bench, they rarely take that kind of request the right way. He was no exception. But he changed his way of thinking. He not only accepted that role with the Lakers, but he fully embraced it. He learned that to win at the highest level, you need to make sacrifices for the team. He learned that the hard way, but it molded him into something much greater than winning any kind of individual award, and that's becoming a champion. But what about you all? Why do you think Bob McAdoo was traded so much in his career? Do you think it was all his doing, or were there other factors not considered? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.